Now the analogy of the chariot is being introduced. So that will now be introduced. It is called Ratha Kalpana. Technically, Kalpana means an analogy that is being introduced. For what purpose? For giving us a framework for practicing spiritual disciplines and realizing who we are. Atmanam rathinam vidhi, shariram rathamevatu, buddhi tu sarathim vidhi, manah pragrahamevacha. Know the individual self as the master of the chariot, the body as the chariot, know the intellect as the charioteer, and the mind as the reins. So what is the chariot example? And why a chariot? Because that was, the coolest thing that was available at that time. Today it would be SUV or Ferrari or something like that. But in those days, they went around in chariots. And the chariot example is actually found not only in the Vedanta and the Upanishads, it is found in Buddhism. It is found in Greek philosophy. So the chariot example was pretty common in those days, although it was used in different ways. So what is the chariot example like? So the chariot itself stands for the body. So this body which we have, that is the chariot. Then a chariot is pulled by horses. So in this body we have sense organs. So these sense organs are compared to the horses which pull the chariot. Then there is a charioteer, like a driver. So in this body we have the intellect, buddhi, who is the charioteer, who is compared to the charioteer. Now in a car you control it with the steering wheel, but in chariots you had the horses were yoked and you had the reins by which you would pull back the horses or make them run. So the reins with which the charioteer controls the horses, and that's compared to the mind. And then at the back of the chariot sits the master of the chariot, the owner of the chariot, the passenger. So at the chariot, who is the passenger? It is the ātma, the self. Just like nowadays in Uber or something, you sit at the back, you're the passenger. We are consciousness. We are pure consciousness. We are ātman. But right now, we don't know that. And we are in association with this whole body, mind, intellect, senses, this system. It's a very accurate description of ourselves. So this body is the chariot. The horses which pull the chariot, they are the 5 senses. These are the ones which pull us outwards into the world. So 5 senses, 5 horses. And then these senses are controlled by the mind. So the mind is the one instrument which is called the inner instrument, antakarana, the inner instrument through which we control the senses. Notice, eyes may be open, but if you're not attentive, you won't notice what's in front of you. The ears are open, sound is coming in, and not attentive, you won't hear what is coming in. So mind is important. All the senses will take the information from the world, from the sense objects. It will internalize those sense objects. Sight, a form, sound, smell, taste, touch, all will be internalized and dumped in the mind. So the mind is the instrument where the senses all coalesce together and where you can control the senses. You can direct the senses. See this, hear that, don't see that, don't hear this. All of this is done by the mind. So the mind is like the reins which can control the horses' senses. Then, deeper than that, who is holding the reins? It's like the driver driving the limousine has the steering wheel in his hand. So the reins which hold the horses are in the hands of the charioteer. So the charioteer is compared to our intellect, who holds the reins of the chariot, who holds the steering wheel. Just like the mind is used, buddhi uses the mind to control the senses. The charioteer uses the reins to control the horses, to direct the horses. Great. That's it? No, that's not it. None of this is the claim of Vedanta, none of this is actually you, a passenger. All of this is meant for you, but you are distinct from all of this. You are the passenger. You have called an Uber. You are not the Uber, the car. You are not the engine or the instruments. You are not the steering wheel. You are not even the driver. You are not any of it. You are the person who sits at the back. The whole machinery and the driver and everything, activities going on, is for your sake, so that you can reach the goal. So you are the sentient being, the ātma, the self, who's sitting in the chariot, in this body-mind complex. And this whole activity of life which is going on is for your sake, so that you reach your goal. Why has this example been given? The example has a purpose. The purpose to help us in spiritual practice. So those aspects of our body-mind which are going to be used for spiritual practice, they have been pointed out separately. So what's being used for spiritual practice? First important thing is the senses. The second important thing is the mind. The third important thing is the intellect. So indriya means senses. Manas means mind. Buddhi means the intellect. These are the three things which are going to be key for our spiritual practice. Who is this all meant for, the chariot? The chariot is running because there's the master of the chariot, the passenger. Chariot is not running for the sake of the horses. The horses are not pulling the chariot for the sake of the charioteer. The whole Uber thing is happening because you have called it. You don't do anything. You just go and sit there. But the car is running for you. The steering wheel is being used and the driver is driving. Everything is happening because you want to go somewhere. Similarly, here we want to attain enlightenment. That's our goal. And the chariot is going on this journey of enlightenment. And these senses run on roads, like the horses run on roads, on lanes. What are the roads they run on? The five sense objects. The eyes see forms, and the nose smells, and the ears hear sound, and the skin touches, and the tongue tastes various tastes. So the five sense organs have their five objects. These are the roads on which the horses run. So this is the whole idea. You're imagining like a chariot is running along. Of course, the chariot is going from one place to another physically. Our goal is not to go from one place to another physically. Then what is our goal? What is our journey? Our journey is from ignorance to knowledge, from being in ignorance to becoming enlightened. That's our journey. But for this, we will need the body, the senses, the mind, and the intellect. All of these are going to be where we do our spiritual practice. Those are the locations. Those are the instruments also by which we will do our spiritual practice. See, if the horses are not well trained, they will go here and there and the chariot will crash and the passenger will not reach his destination. So the horses have to be well trained. Similarly, if the reins by which the charioteer controls the horses, if the reins are not steady, then the charioteer, it's like the steering wheel which has come loose in your hands. Now you can't, unless it's a self-driving car, then you're in trouble. The driver, you are just holding the steering wheel. So the reins, like the steering wheel, the reins with which the charioteer controls the horses, that must be steady and well fixed. And then the charioteer, the one who's driving you, the driver must be well informed where you're supposed to go. Suppose the driver doesn't know where to go. The driver is confused. GPS is not working. So then you will never reach the goal. Even if the chariot is good and the horses are well trained and the reins are firm, but the driver doesn't know where he's going. So the driver has to be very well informed, has to know what he is doing. So all these three conditions have to be fulfilled. Of course, the chariot also must be in good shape. Like the car, there has to be enough fuel and it has to run well serviced and everything. Now apply it to our life. The senses have to be trained. The mind has to be steady, and the intellect has to be filled with Vedantic understanding. Then only you, the Jivatman, you will reach your goal. Then you will go beyond suffering, attain permanent bliss. So this is the whole plot I've already told you. Now we'll go a little deeper into that before I just read out the verses, the mantras. First level of practice. It goes without saying that health is important. The chariot must be in good shape. It shouldn't fall apart the moment you start, the wheels shouldn't come off or things like that. So similarly, for spiritual life, physical health is important. This is an old Sanskrit saying, Shariram adya khalu dharma sadhanam. The body is the first and primary means for the practice of dharma. So the health of the body It must be well, you must eat healthy, exercise, lead a balanced life, uh, don't be sleep deprived, all of that, for you are setting off on the greatest journey, spiritual journey, the greatest adventure that a human being can take. That is the whole purpose of life, and the body is meant for that. Really, the human body is not meant for making money, enjoying sense pleasures, or all sorts of useless activities which we fill up our lives with. That's not the purpose of the human body. The human body is here to take us on a spiritual journey. So health is important. Swami Pavitrananda ji, who was here in the Vedanta Society of New York, it seems he used to say that do not abuse the horse you cannot dismount from. You cannot get down from the horse, but don't abuse. Of course, don't abuse the horse anyway. But especially if you are on a horse and you can't get down from it, it's so easy to say, I'm not the body, not the mind. But as long as you haven't realized it, you don't see it very clearly, till that point, you have to take care of the body. Don't indulge the body, but don't destroy or damage the body also. Sometimes people neglect the body, either out of neglect or out of excessive strain and misuse or abuse of the body, in the sense of too much austerities, for example. I've seen people go mad. Sometimes young monks, novices, they are over enthusiastic that we become enlightened by this weekend or something like that. That doesn't work. It's a marathon. It's not a sprint. We have been at it for lifetimes. So give it some time. Give it a few years. So sometimes they do excessive austerities, working throughout the day, trying to meditate throughout the night. You're not ready for that yet. And then there's a physical or nervous breakdown. I have seen a few cases like that. Very sad. They're all sincere young men, but overdoing it. The opposite is also is equally bad. Lazy. And that's because getting used to a comfortable, luxurious lifestyle, then getting up early in the morning is difficult. Sitting for long hours in meditation is difficult. Vedantic study is boring. Devotion to God is not coming. It feels mechanical. But interest in the world is very much there. So that comes from a soft or over comfortable or luxurious lazy lifestyle. Both are to be avoided. So that's at the physical level. Now, the sensory level. The senses are very powerful. Here, I just want to say, why is it so difficult to change ourselves? We know the story of Krishna going to teach the villain of Mahabharata, Duryodhana, about spiritual knowledge and knowledge of dharma. And the villain Duryodhana, the prince, evil prince, he says, don't teach me about dharma. Don't teach me about adharma. I know what is dharma and what is adharma. I know what is right and what is wrong. My problem is not that. My problem is I don't want to do what is right. And I can't stop myself from doing what is wrong. Well, why don't you change it then? If you know it's right and wrong, and why don't you change it? He says, I can't change it. There is a great force within me which is pushing me along this path and I can't do anything. Janami dharmam nachame pravritti. Janami adharmam nachame nivritti. Kenapi devena hridhi sthitena yatha niyojito asmi tatha karomi. Now, he's honest. He gives us this fundamental human problem, Now the question is, what is this force which doesn't enable us to change or makes change in our lives so difficult? It is the power of this sensory system. Recently, Jonathan Haidt, who is a psychologist who works right here in New York, one of his early works, he tackled this problem. Why change is so difficult? So he says, imagine a man riding an elephant. So the Mahut is riding the elephant, and the Mahut knows where he wants to go, and he directs the elephant to take him there. But, and here is the big thing, it will work only if the elephant listens to the Mahut. But the elephant wants to go left and the Mahut wants to go right. Then the Mahut can't force the elephant to go right, because the elephant is much stronger than the Mahut. Now, that is exactly the problem with us. Our books, Vedanta, positive psychology, management seminars, and management coaches, all of these, they all work at the level of the intellect. You hear a nice TED talk, you read a nice book or attend a nice Vedanta class or yoga class, and you're convinced. It's great. Yes, I should get up early before sunrise, and I should do yoga, or I should chant the Gita. But then what happens? What happens is the intellect has been convinced, but the elephant, what is the elephant? The lower mind and the sensory system, especially the sensory system. It's the pranamaya kosha, annamaya kosha, the physical body and the vital body. They don't respond to books and TED talks and Vedanta classes. They are like the elephant. So you're convinced, I want to jump out of bed tomorrow early in the morning. I'm going to change my life. I'm going to lead a monk-like meditative life. Next morning, what happens? When it's time to jump out of bed, suddenly you don't feel like doing it. You want to do it, but the body rebels. The body says, I didn't sign up for this. You go, oh intellect. You are convinced. You go and do yoga and you do meditation. I'm going to sleep under the covers. This is the problem. It's the intellect which understands things, which makes decisions, but the actual work has to be done by the body. And the poor body says, you didn't ask me whether I want to get up in the cold morning from under the bed sheets and do your silly yoga exercises. And no, I'd rather be much comfortable sleeping here. I'm tired, let me sleep. So the body, the sensory system is like the elephant. And the intellect is like the mahout. The mahout cannot convince. The mahout is convinced by lectures. Intellect understands by lectures and books, but the sensory system is not convinced. You can't give it a lecture. You can't give the elephant a lecture. The elephant is not interested in your lectures. So what happens, like Duryodhana said, the villain in Mahabharata said, there's a force within me. I understand. See, the mahout is convinced that what is right and what is wrong, I get it. But at no point am I interested. So the desire which is coming, not there. Actual actions, they are not following what is right and not avoiding what is wrong. That is, the elephant is not responding. The elephant is going its own way. It's a subtle force, but it's a huge force, and compared to which the intellect is a very weak thing. And this has to be tackled. If it's not tackled, we'll be like Duryodhana saying, I know what's right and wrong. I don't feel like it. See, this is a very big thing. I may decide, this is the way I'm going to lead my life. This is when I will get up. This is how much I will meditate. This is how much I will repeat the name of the Lord, the mantra japa. What happens? No enthusiasm is there. The feeling does not come. The excitement does not come. Why? Because the intellect is not in charge of your emotions. Emotions are connected to the lower mind, and they're controlled by our vasanas and our tendencies. So, what can be done? Think again, what does the elephant respond to? Elephant does not respond to lectures, books, classes, persuasion. No. The elephant responds to training. What does the mahout do with the elephant? Training. And training basically means repetition. The core of training is repetition, not arguments, not logic, repetition. Our character is formed by a cluster of habits, and habits are formed by repetition. The senses can be trained. We can clearly see some people are so disciplined, some are not so disciplined. That means the senses can be trained. It can be pretty easy to wake up at 4 a.m. in the morning. It can be. It can be intolerable to sleep beyond 4 a.m. I've seen so many our monastic brothers who lived in they trained themselves in the ashrams. I've seen a monk. Once I was in the hospital, and I was a novice. I was sick. I was very sick. I was on the IV, and I thought, so I'm very sick. I can be excused for not getting up early in the morning and meditating tomorrow on the bed. So I lay down, and early in the morning, I saw there was this old monk, more than 80 years old. He just had an operation. Next morning, it was dark in the hospital ward. I saw him sit up on his bed and face the wall, ramrod straight. for more than 2 hours straight and deep meditation. That was a lesson to me. How does he manage it? It's a lifetime's practice. It's a lifetime's practice. It's not a decision. Even I want to do that, but he wants to do it and he can do it. I want to do it and immediately make excuses. I'm too sick to do it now, so I won't do it now. So that comes from practice. What is so difficult without practice is pretty easy with practice. It becomes natural, becomes like second thought with practice. With practice, habits, clusters of habits are formed, or habits can be changed. So the senses have to be trained. Which road they should run on, what the eyes should see, what they should not see, what the ears should hear, what they should not hear. To cultivate the tastes, you can cultivate. Then what happens is, what is good for us, that the senses will want. Instead of looking at the latest in gossip and news, it will want to read Vedanta books. So the senses can be trained up that way. The wanting will come then from within. It will become a habit then. And character is nothing but a cluster of habits. All these habits taken together, good habits taken together, go to form our character. All right. One point here, couple of points. First of all, this is what was meant by Shreya and Preya. In the earlier section, there's a big deal about what is good for us and what is pleasant. So what is pleasant for us? An untrained elephant goes that way, where the bananas are. So the elephant will go and try to snatch the bananas. The trained elephant will not do that. Similarly, if the pleasant and the good they present themselves all the time, moment to moment, it is the trained senses which will automatically pick up what is good and avoid the pleasant. The untrained senses will automatically run to what is pleasant. The eyes will want to see what they like to see. The ears will want to hear what they want to hear. And want to hear means, what do they want to hear? We want to hear our praise, for example. We also want to hear our criticism. We are very worried about what people are saying about us. Maybe more than praise. We are very happy with the moment we are happy with praise, we'll be very troubled by criticism. Senses, the trained senses will be not interested in your praise, will not be interested in in criticism also. I remember walking with a very senior monk in the ashram where I joined the order. One day, the usual path in which we were walking, the senior monk suddenly said, let's take the other path. And we switched paths. And I asked, why didn't you go down that path? He said, there was this group of students standing and I overheard they were talking about me. I don't want to hear. So immediately he changed the path. Now see, I would have wanted to hear, oh, what are they saying about me? Surely something good, or maybe even more important, something bad. Oh God, what are they saying about me? No, he doesn't want to hear. What the ear wants to hear, what the tongue wants to eat, delicious food or healthy food. What the skin wants to touch, the nose wants to smell, especially hearing, and so delighted about reading the newspaper. The same delight is not there in reading Vedanta texts. Why not? It has not been trained. The mind and the senses have not been trained. The trained mind and senses will take you on the right path, on the path which is the good, Shreya, and will automatically, habitually avoid the path which is pleasant and leads away from your goal. And what's wrong with picking the pleasant path? Often the pleasant path does not take you towards your goal. So that's the problem. So training of the senses, that's the first stage. The second stage is, even the training of the senses will not work until that which controls the senses. What is that? The mind. The problem with the mind is attention. Attention must be trained. We, especially in this day and age, huge problem. Lack of focus, lack of concentration, the flickering mind. So the mind must be trained to attend. We must be able to direct our attention to what we want to. I want to focus on Vedanta. I want to focus on the object of meditation. I want to follow the breath. I want to repeat the mantra mindfully. I can't. My mind goes here and there. It's like the reins of the chariot, which are loose and which are not responsive. then how can the charioteer control the senses? So the mind has to be mindful. Literally, that's the word you will see used in the Upanishad. Samanaska, mindful. Mindful means training of attention. Otherwise, nothing will work. No amount of philosophy will work. It's the mindful, in the mind which is mindful, then only it can translate all your goals, all your projects into actual life. So mindfulness, mindful mind. Then, more inward, more important, the charioteer, the driver, has to be well informed about where you are going. The intellect has to be very clear. What is my goal in life? My goal is moksha, liberation, going beyond sorrow, enlightenment, nothing short of that. That is the human goal. The intellect has to be very clear about this. Buddhi, the intellect has to be very clear. This is my goal. This is what is to be done. The senses are to be trained. The mind has to be mindful. And I must be steady on the path of Vedanta to realize I am Brahman. What am I? Why am I like this? How am I Brahman? All this must be understood by the intellect. That is, intellect must be filled with Vedantic understanding. Then only the intellect filled with Vedantic understanding, the mind which is mindful, and the senses which are well trained, the senses become like trained horses. The mindful mind is like the reins firmly in the hand of an informed charioteer, which is equal to the Vedantic intellect. Then the master of the chariot, the passenger of the chariot, will reach his goal, the goal from which there is no return, that is moksha, liberation, salvation. In the language of the Upanishad, the state of Vishnu, the transcendent state of Vishnu. That is the spiritual journey. Now, I will read the verses, the mantras, and we'll see. We have done mantra number 3. So mantra number 3 told us that the body is the chariot and you are the passenger in the chariot. The intellect is the driver and the mind is the reins. And then the next verse, mantra number 4. Indriyani hayan ahu vishayangsteshu gocharan atmindriya mano yuktam bhoktityahur manishina. They call the organs the horses. The objects of the organs are the roads. The discriminating people call that self the enjoyer when it is associated with body, organs, and mind. Enjoyer means the jivatma, us, the sentient being. In Sanskrit, bhokta. You, the pure consciousness, in association with intellect, what do you become? You become the knower. In association with the mind, you become the thinker. In association with the senses, you become the seer and the hearer and the touch. So like that, all the functions, you are the one who is experiencing it all. It's called bhokta. You experience pleasure and pain, you the consciousness, in association with intellect, mind, and senses. Then the spiritual journey. Importance of training the senses, mind, and intellect. Training the senses, focusing the mind, and informing the intellect or educating the intellect. Number 5. Yastva vijnanavan bhavati ayuktena manasa sada tasyindriyanyavashyani dushtashva ivasarathe. But the organs of that intellect, which being ever associated with an uncontrolled mind becomes devoid of discrimination, are unruly like the vicious horses of the charioteer. So disastrous. The intellect loses its discrimination. It may have read Vedanta, but now nothing comes to mind and gets swept away. Swept away, why? The mind is not focused and the sense organs are running wild like the vicious horses which are untrained. What the senses want, the mind is pulling you along in that direction. And the intellect, which is supposed to tell us, no, this is not going to take us to our goal. The intellect also says, it's all right. I can do it this time. Next time we will take a different path. So intellect also gives in. The senses are running after their objects. The mind is unfocused, flickering from one thing to another. The intellect is busy not with Vedanta, with endless projects, one thing after another, endless useless projects, which it thinks it will make us happy. No, one thing to another, we are going from one thing to another. Time is passing, age is coming on, death is ever coming closer, and we are no closer to the goal of enlightenment. Then number 6, yastu vijnanavan bhavati yuktena manasa sada tasyendriyani bashyani sadashva iva sarathe. In contrast, what is the situation for a spiritual seeker, a good Vedanta student? But of that intellect which, being ever associated with restrained mind, is endowed with discrimination, the organs are controllable like the good horses of the charioteer. The organs are controlled because they are well trained, the mind is focused, and the intellect is filled with Vedantic discrimination or this discernment. What is Vedantic discernment? Remember, Viveka, the eternal and the non-eternal. There is a goal of human life, which is enlightenment. There is a high, glorious purpose to human life. That's what I am chasing. And the mind should fall in line with that. The senses should fall in line with that, so that moment to moment we can take the right decision. Number 7. What is the result of trained senses, focused mind, and educated intellect? And what is the result of the uneducated intellect and unfocused mind and untrained senses? Yastva vijnanavan bhavati amanaska sadashuchi nasa tat padamapnoti samsaram chadhigacchati. But he, that master of the chariot, does not attain that goal through being associated with a non-discriminating intellect and an uncontrollable mind, is ever impure, and he attains worldly existence. So the senses are ever running to impure ends, just for sense enjoyment. And I know that those are not what I should be doing. Like Duryodhana, I know that is wrong, and yet the senses are running there. The mind is flickering, and the intellect is, its Vedantic knowledge is shaky, and it is unable to resist the power of the senses and the mind. See, what happens is, the intellect, the more subtle it is, more powerful. Who is more powerful than the senses? Mind. Because mind controls the senses. Who is more powerful than the mind? Intellect. But in most cases, if they are not controlled and if they're not trained, what will happen is, the sensory system is so powerful, it overcomes the mind. It takes over the mind. The mind is filled with sensory desires. And that mind filled with sensory desires leads the intellect astray. Leads the intellect astray means, there may be information in the intellect. Intellect may know, this is my goal, this is right, this will take me towards my goal, that will take me away from my goal. And yet the intellect is helpless. It is pulled along. I can't resist. That is the lament of every addict. I can't resist. I want to, but I am helpless. One more point, just additional point here. Elephant and the Mahut. Remember, not everybody has the same elephant. Some elephants are much more easily trained, and some are very difficult to train. What is the difference between the elephants? It is the constitution of our mind, our senses, mind, our samskaras. Some have a more sattvic personality, less of rajas and tamas. That is more conducive to spiritual life. Some have a more rajasic personality. They have all the enthusiasm, but they are not steady in their enthusiasm. They take up one thing after another and jump on from one goal to another goal. And then some have a primarily tamasic constituent of the mind, of the personality. And there, neither enthusiasm is there, nor discipline is there. But the sattvic person, Krishna says in the Gita, dhrityutsaha samanvita, is endowed with determination and enthusiasm. So jumps into spiritual life because I love to meditate. I love to study Vedanta. I'm filled with devotion for Krishna or for my Ishta Devata. And I love to do good to others, to serve others. That feeling is there. That liking is there. And the disciplined life is there. So that shows a sattvic personality. That person has a good elephant, easily trained. Others' elephant may not be so easily trained. Where do we get these elephants from? We have earned it in many lives, many past lives. So it's no good if my makeup is tamasic, then spiritual life is not possible for me. No, it is possible for everybody. But one must be a little honest and look into our own constitution of my mind and sensory system, my samskaras, and be honest and admit to myself where I am. Then the discussion is there later on in the Gita, where the three gunas are talked about. It's only this, that the point is that if you have a sattvic constitution, your spiritual life will be easier, smoother, faster. If you have a rajasic or tamasic constitution, then the struggle will be that much more. It will take more time and more struggle. That's all. Spiritual life is possible for everybody, and one should embark on that journey the moment you're inspired to do so. Doesn't matter what kind of elephant you have been issued. So this person does not attain that goal. Na tat padam apnoti. But what happens? Saṃsāram chādhikacchati. Continues to be whirled around in samsara. From birth to birth, this person goes around, because this person is just following one's own desires. If that person is decent, moral, that person will lead a religious, moral life and have a better kind of samsara. If the person is completely uncontrolled, then the person will have a terrible kind of samsara, hellish kind of one life to another. Then next, 8. Yastu vijnanavan bhavati samanaska sadashuchi satu tatpadam apnoti yasmad bhuyo na jayate. That master of the chariot, however, who is associated with a discriminating intellect and being endowed with a controlled mind, is ever pure, attains that goal from which he is not born again. This is the result for a person who has trained the senses, who has focused the mind and filled the intellect with Vedantic understanding. That person will become enlightened and realize the goal. Then number 9. Vijnana sarathir yastu manah pragrahavan nara sodhvana paramapnoti tadvishno paramam padam. A glorious verse which tells us what will he attain, what goal is attained. The man, however, who has as his charioteer a discriminating intellect and who has under control the reins of the mind, attains the end of the road, and that is the highest place of Vishnu. Tad Vishnu Paramam Padam, the highest abode of Vishnu.